Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated. I want to go back to the beginnings. We all have a beginning, and I had mine in probably about 1964 when my father bought my first guitar for me. It was a Gibson J45. I thought I had gone to heaven when I got that guitar because before that I had a $13 Stella guitar, and it was an atrocious guitar to play, so the Gibson really accelerated things for me. And we would sit on the balcony of 47 Frank Street with my friends with their guitars, and we would sing. And back then we were singing in 1964, Peter, Paul, and Mary's songs, Michael Row the Boat Ashore, all of those songs, dreaming of how does one get into the music world? But we enjoyed those days. Then in 1968, I did my first show at the Sterling Jamboree. It was a talent show. And I went in and actually won the talent show. I got lucky. There was nobody there better that day. But I got a very lucky start in the sense that it gave me the impetus to jump into the music business. So in 1968, I looked down a long road and I said, this is where I want to go. Well, it's been 55 years roughly since I did that. And life has been good. The music world has been wonderful. The very first song I recorded was in 1972, and I'm going to sing that song for you now because I haven't played it for a long time. It was a song that I wrote about unrequited love, and songwriters seem to go that path, mainly because we're so damn lonely half the time because we're writing too much and not dating enough. So I wrote this song about unrequited love, and maybe you have a similar story if you follow along with The Winds of November Rain. Sabbath Sunday last November, saw you steal away down a country road in November rain. The leaves all withered, dead and fallen, they cried beneath your feet. They heard you go, they told me so. On that cold November Sabbath Sunday morning, dum-dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, I do believe it's gonna rain. Dum-dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, I do believe it's gonna rain today. As I'm wandering through this night I'm living, I'm wondering if your love is giving life to another man. Well, mercy has an eye on you. Oh, it all depends on if you make me laugh or if you make me cry. Like on that cold November Sunday Sabbath morning, dum-dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, I do believe it's gonna rain. Dum-dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, I do believe it's gonna rain today. Oh, dum-dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, I do believe it's gonna rain. Dum-dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, dum-dee-I, I do believe it's gonna rain. I can feel the coming rain. Here comes that cold November rain. Hey, ooh. Thank you. Well, that was 1972. It went to number 16 in Canada, and I was beside myself. I thought, my gosh, now where do we go? It's a long road. There's a lot of fun along the way. My father, who played so much into my musical history, he loved to play the fiddle. He was atrocious. When he played the fiddle, everybody wanted to leave the house. And he played a little bit of guitar. He taught me my first 3 chords back on my Stella guitar. And atrocious. But he loved it. And I always said that if you sing, do many of you sing? Do you sing in the shower? You all sing. We all sing. It's a question of how much you want to sing and how often you do. But my father loved to sing and play the guitar and play the fiddle. And he always said to me, take this as a gift and always respect the gift, and the gift will look after you. And I've tried to always do that through all these years. He told me the story one time of a young lady that he knew while he worked as a cop on the beat in Ottawa. He worked at Waller Street back in those days. I'm talking in the 1940s. So he met this woman on the Byward Market, and she had fallen from the church, and she was making her living, as they do. But he understood that this was just a troubled child. He told me a story anyway, that one day, after keeping an eye on just how she was doing, that she was safe. She was a little different than most. She seemed to be more lost than enjoying her profession. And one day she was gone, and he said to me he often wondered where she had gone. Well, I put together a song based on what he gave me, the information that he spoke. And it's called the Rideau Street Queen. And this is my interpretation of who I think that person was. She left Renfrew County and she came to the city. She was filled with ambition and dreams. A farmer's young daughter that was looking for the pleasure and the laughter that the city could give. And from the streetcars she marveled at the mannequin ladies in the window of the big Freeman store, where memories of Daddy and old Renfrew County were a long way from Dalhousie Ward. But don't you condemn her, criticize or blame her. Don't go calling her names. There are daughters who will follow in the footsteps of the Rideau Street Queen. And don't point your finger or feel you're much better. Don't go around throwing stones. The memories of Daddy and old Renfrew County can be a long way from Dalhousie Ward. While she was dreaming, she met with a stranger who would steal her sweet dreams away. He'd use and abuse her, he'd strip her of virtue and abandon the woman he made. And now in the city when the streets are near empty, a new light in the night can be seen. The ladies that corner the old Byward Market have made room for the Rideau Street Queen. But don't you condemn her, criticize or blame her. Don't go calling her names. There are daughters who will follow in the footsteps of the Rideau Street Queen. And don't point your finger or feel you're much better. Don't you go around throwing stones. The memories of Daddy and old Renfrew County can be a long way from Dalhousie Ward. Yes, the memories of Daddy and old Renfrew County can be a long way from Dalhousie Ward. Thank you so much. Inspiration is the name of the game as a songwriter. You can, you know, they used to say that Stompin' Tom was the kind of guy, he was very easily influenced to write a song. It took nothing for him to write a song. He could walk out of a bar in Sudbury on a Saturday night and fall over somebody and sit down on the curb and write about it. That's one set of inspirational terms. I was primarily, it happened with me in the Gatineau in a big way. The Gatineau Hills, back in the early 70s, was a back-to-the-land movement for a lot of people who lived in the area. We were finding old abandoned farms back up in the woods, and we were moving up to them and moving into them in 1970. If you can imagine, back then, and we were growing stuff. The 70s were wonderful. It wasn't legal back then to grow stuff. But we grew this stuff. And if we were caught with anything, you know, if you had something in your pocket, you could get 2 years. And then Trudeau came along and legalized the whole thing, and now we're not interested anymore. But the 70s were great. They were fabulous. And we went back to the land, and we lived in homes. The insulation in these old houses, if there were no windows, we just put plastic up, and we were happy to live there. And one of my dear friends, Lolly Ray, he was a military guy that he just decided to become a beatnik back in the late 60s. And then he lost it completely, and he decided he'd be going back to the land. He was actually a terminal schizophrenic, as it turned out, and spent his entire life living back in the woods. But in the beginning days with Ray, he would go up into the Gatineau, and I would go up and visit him. And I had no idea that he was going to influence me to eventually move to the Gatineau, which I did. And that changed my life when I did that. But it was Ray that really showed me that there was a life beyond city trappings, beyond having a fast car, beyond having a job and new shoes and all of those things. He loved the land. He loved the air. He loved God, or the being that he foresaw as being God. But his name was Lolly Ray Parker. He was my best friend. I just buried Ray, and we put him in the cemetery at Rupert. But being a songwriter, by then I had been writing songs, and I was like I said about Tom, you run across somebody, and I could write about you next. About those sandwiches in the church that we talked about earlier. You never know. This is for my friend, Lolly Ray. Lolly Ray was the old man's given name. He never had much more, but just the same. He showed me life was good even when you're poor. And he carved me a walking stick out of hickory wood. City folks said Lolly Ray was scared. I'd visit when I could because I cared. Living in an old forgotten place, I'd sit and read the lines written on his face. He taught me that heaven was a simple life, a trusting friend and a loving wife, and we took time to watch a flower grow. The old man always loved the summer rain. Lolly Ray loved the summer rain. Lolly Ray heard voices in the hills, and the song they sang when everything was still. It was the closest thing to God that he'd ever seen, and the nearest to the truth that he'd ever been. But Lolly Ray and the truth came to an end, and looking back, I think I saw it then, in his lonely searching eyes and his reaching hands. There were a million things he'd never understand. Oh, I wish that it was summertime, when a simple life was on my mind, and we'd take time to watch a flower grow. I remember the time the rain made Lolly cry. It was just about a week before he died. Thank you. Thank you, Ray. There was a place that I lived in for years, a log cabin in the Gatineau in the 70s. And I had aspirations to make it in the business, but I always was troubled by the idea of going to Nashville in my country music days. And I started getting a little more folk involved in my music. And I started to realize that I wasn't interested so much in becoming a Nashville clone or even celebrating the music of Nashville so much as my neighbors and places around me. So I started looking around, and you know, the funniest thing happened. Truth is, there's as much excitement and individuality and extraordinary people all around us. We just need to stop for a minute and look at them and listen to them and watch them and see what they do. So I started looking around at different things from the cabin where I sat and in lantern light, a log cabin. I used to go out and chop ice to get water. I chopped wood to keep warm. And I wrote by lantern light. And that was the most incredible experience to do that. And on a winter's night when the snow was falling and the lantern light was burning, different songs came to mind. And some of them were funny as heck as you looked around at all of your neighbors. And I started to work at the local bar because you can't just live in a log cabin and write songs by lantern light if you don't have anything to eat. So I decided I would work at the local hotel. So I started working at the Brendan's Hill Inn. And that was a good hour's drive from Ottawa. We played there and entertained. And different people came in, but word got out. People started coming up from the city to see who this crazy guy from the bush was coming out and singing about people around him. And one of the guys I talked about with it was Clarence Hickey. Clarence was just my neighbor down the road, but crazier than a bed bug. And he was a very interesting fellow. We had a village right across from the Brendan's Hill Inn that we called Hickey Village, because all the Hickey boys lived there. Ray Hickey lived there, and Clarence Hickey was over there, and the other Hickey there, he was over there. So the Hickeys were great. They lived off welfare checks, and every month they would fight for who would buy the beer this month. And Clarence, though, did manage to have a 1948 Dodge truck that I absolutely fell in love with. And this 48 Dodge truck showed up one day at the Brendan's Hill Inn. We sang by the window, and it pulled right up, and I could turn around like this from the microphone, and I could see this 48 Dodge. Well, I was truck crazy back in those days. I had an old truck, but not a 48 Dodge. And this thing just blew my mind. And Clarence came in, and I got to know that was his baby. It was painted black, and it needed a paint job. And when it was time, he did it the way you do up in the woods, up in the Gatineau Hills. You just take a paintbrush and a can, and you just slop it on. And it had swirls and marks from the brush. It was very artistic. You couldn't buy that today. So I started talking to him in the club. And he would sit down with all his friends, and I'd say from the stage, "Clarence, I love that 48 Dodge, man." He said, "Do ya?" I said, "I'd like to buy that 48 Dodge. Would you sell it to me?" And he'd always look at me and say, "Well, buy me a beer after, and we'll talk about it." The next 2 years, I spent $397 on beer never sold it to me. Never sold it to me. Gave it to his daughter, Nita. Gave her the truck. Nita Hickey. I remember the first time I met her. Hi. I'm Nita Hickey. So I gave her one. So I'm just kidding. So Clarence Hickey, I sang, finally I wrote like I said, I had to write a song about it. I'm a songwriter. I had to write a song about it. So I wrote this song about this 1948 Dodge and the man Clarence Hickey. But I didn't get the truck. But I would sing this to him every time he came in the club. He thought he was a local hero. And he knew that if he sold me the truck, the song wouldn't be sung anymore, so he wouldn't sell it. Hey, Clarence Hickey, won't you sell me your 1948 Dodge? I love that truck, Clarence. I seen her rolling down the highway and I never noticed any smoke pouring out of her exhaust. No, sir, she was clean as a whistle. My, she sure looked pretty when you drove her down to the city to fix up the kingpins. I wished I'd have taken a ride in that 1948 Dodge. God, I love that truck. Let me tell you something. The first time I ever saw her, it was in the dead of winter, and the Fahrenheit read 20 below. But I saw Clarence climb inside her, and you know something? When he kicked down on the starter, I swear, my God, you should have seen that mother go. With me crying, hey, Clarence Hickey, won't you sell me that 1948 Dodge? Please, Clarence. I've seen her rolling down the highway and I never noticed any smoke pouring out of her exhaust. By God, Terry, she was clean as a whistle. My God, she sure looked pretty when he drove her to Ryan's BP to check out the kingpins again. I wish I'd have taken a ride in that 1948 Dodge. I still have dreams about that truck. My God, the more I think about it, I swear I'd have given my right arm and a leg if he'd have sold me that 48 Dodge. I still lose sleep over that Dodge. 48 Dodge. Well, thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm truck crazy. That's part of it. I'm also at best of times unsound. One time I was in Kingston as I'm continuing to figure out my career. I wrote this next song many, many years ago. And I just decided that coming home one night I had this idea. We'd stayed at the Princess Hotel in Kingston a little too long after hours, had a few too many pops. And I got in the car and I started writing this song. And in my head, it was about a fictitious guy by the name of Ulysses Moses Henson. And after I had the title, I thought, what the hell am I going to do with this? So I had to come up with something. So I figured out that Ulysses Moses Henson was a mountain man. So that was halfway. I was about at Smiths Falls by then, halfway to Ottawa. So the song was half done. It was now 4 in the morning. And I was staying at my mother's house because I was a struggling musician working with a road band called the Honey West Show, making something like, I think back then, less than $200 a week. But it was money in the pocket. So halfway, I had the idea was a mountain man who had a fight. I get it, now I got it, with a grizzly bear. So now I'm gonna write a song about a mountain man fighting with a grizzly bear. So I got home to my mother's house and went straight down to the basement where I kept a little place there to sleep. And my mother was upstairs. She was very, very French, spoke with a very, very strong accent when she spoke English. Right to her dying day, God love her. Died at 93, my mother. So here I was in the basement writing this song. Well, a mountain man had to obviously have a character. It can't just be any old Joe Blow. So in this story, the mountain man gets fairly demented because the bear really hurt him in the struggle, in my mind. And I'm down in the basement all night doing my thing about the mountain man. My mother upstairs, meanwhile, doesn't know what is going on. When I came up in the morning, she looked at me and she said, Wayne, are you okay? I said, yes, of course, Mom. Why? I heard you in the basement. You sound crazy. I said, well, yes. I wrote a crazy song, Mom. And I did complete the song, and I sang it one time at a party. I swore I'd never do it twice. I didn't want to have to do it. It was just a crazy song. But to this day, people ask when I perform anywhere for this particular song. And I say, sure, no problem. So this is what happens when a mountain man and a grizzly bear meet up, and you get a songwriter like me, crazy enough to even come up and conceive the idea. And imagine what this guy must look like, I thought. Well, here's what I thought. J. Ulysses Moses Henson. J. Ulysses was a mountain man. He hid in the hills because his face was scarred from a wrestling match with a grizzly bear. Oh, he carved him a home in the belly of a giant oak tree. J. Ulysses swore his vengeance on that grizzly bear. He'd run through the hills screaming and shouting at bears that weren't even there. People in the town would lay and shiver in their sleep. But he'd go, come on, bear. I'm gonna get you, bear. You see, J. Ulysses Moses Henson, he was raving mad. J. Ulysses Moses Henson, J. Ulysses the mountain man. You better start running if you hear him coming, because he's out there looking for the grizzly bear. J. Ulysses Moses Henson finally cornered the grizzly bear. Legend says that outside of Manitic, the two giants met on open ground. J. Ulysses Moses Henson and the grizzly bear. Well, 3 days later, when the dust had settled, Ulysses and the bear weren't there. People in Manitic thought it was over, but no, it didn't end there. Because tonight, when you go to sleep, you're gonna hear... Come on, bear! Gonna get you, bear. Well, there they go. Through the hills smoking, right through the Ottawa Valley. It's the mountain man. Oh, and here he comes, my God, it's J. Ulysses Moses Henson, the mountain man. They called him J. Ulysses Moses Henson, J. Ulysses Moses Henson, J. Ulysses Moses Henson, chasing the grizzly bear. Thank you. Much appreciated.